The history of the Jewish people can be described as a succession of exoduses and exiles, leaving behind very few traces of their wanderings along the shores of the Mediterranean. In Spain, there is almost no pictorial representation of their synagogues, which could record their history. Here, there's scarcely a family tree going back a couple of generations. It's a hidden history. Arabs conquer southern Spain in the year 711, transforming this rugged Christian kingdom into their own for 700 years. They create paradise on earth with elegant palaces, patios lined with orange trees, tempered by fountains, creating the second largest city of the time after Constantinople, Cordoba. The Arab invasion seals the fate of the Jews of Sepharad, the ancient Hebrew word for Spain. The Jews will live here during one of the most flourishing periods in their history. It's thanks to the help of the Jews that the Muslims occupy the peninsula so swiftly in just 3 years of conquest. In return, the Jews are given positions of power. They gain wide respect in Islamic circles, and their culture prospers. To be Sepharad, for the Jews of the Iberian Peninsula, is synonymous of a way of life, calling Spain their home, their second Jerusalem. Over much of this time, Jews and Muslims coexist, enriching one another's lives and culture. This period, stretching from the 8th till the 14th century, will be known as Al-Andalus, the golden age of the Arab world in Andalusia.
The greatness of the city of Cordoba is linked to two communities, the Hispanic Muslims and our Sephardic Jewish community.
Sebastián de la Obra is a poet and writer. He is the director of a museum of Jewish culture of Spain, Casa Sepharad.
Between the 9th and 10th centuries, there's no other city in Europe where Jews play such an important role, which was not without consequences. Because the courtiers, the rich of Cordoba were Jewish, the intellectuals of Cordoba were Jewish, the best doctors, the translators, the diplomats, all were here in Cordoba.
It was all too good to last. After centuries under Arab rule, the Catholics retake the reins of power. This period is called the Reconquista. And in time, they will reign over almost the entire Iberian Peninsula.
The Cordoba of 1315 is a city which lost the memory of its greatness. And our Jewish community was a decaying community, which had to be discreet.
During this period, the church insisted on the destruction of the great synagogue of Cordoba.
There was an order from the Bishop of Cordoba stating that it was forbidden for synagogues to go beyond the height of the smallest church in the city. There were therefore two options: cut the tops off of the synagogues or destroy them. They were destroyed.
For 5 centuries, no sound of Hebrew chants would resonate between the walls of this Andalusian city.
This small synagogue will not be discovered until the 19th century, during a storm. It was a terrible, devastating storm. The roof, in bad condition, caused a leak, which turned into a flood. This place had been a chapel, a hermitage, a small hospital. It was even the seat of the Shoemakers Guild. On this particular night of rain and thunderstorms, the water got into the stucco, causing the plaster to become loose, revealing underneath elements which were not part of this chapel. And then, in 1884, this edifice ceases being a place of forgotten memory and reclaims itself for what it once was. They discover that it is a synagogue of Cordoba.
The hidden synagogue of Cordoba is located in the Jewish quarter known as the Juderia. It is the only surviving synagogue in this city.
The first name given to this synagogue and written in Hebrew on the walls were the words miniature sanctuary, which means that the builder of this synagogue knew that he was building a tiny container, a precious jewel box in miniature, which did not correspond to the wishes of the community, nor signify its importance.
Despite its construction during the Christian era, the decor of this synagogue is Moorish with the use of plasterwork called mudahar. It is probably the work of Muslim craftsmen. It shares an undeniable decorative heritage with mosques of the time. This style of decor is at the crossroads of Jewish and Muslim cultures.
This synagogue is the most beautiful on the peninsula. Because in the foundation of Jewish tradition, harmony, perfection, balance, and proportion are qualities associated with God.
The second chapter of the history of Sepharad opens here in the Christian capital of Castile, Toledo. In the Middle Ages, it is one of the most important cities of Spain. The Jewish community was established in Toledo in the 3rd century. But not until the 14th century did it achieve a brief period of prosperity. Here, there exists one of the most ancient and largest surviving synagogues of this period. Now a museum, but once a living witness to history. Garrido is an historian conducting research on Jewish art from the Iberian Peninsula during the Middle Ages.
If this synagogue is particularly tall in comparison with other synagogues, it is because its founder, Samuel Halevi, was the treasurer to Peter I, King of Castile. Samuel Halevi was the most influential Jew of Castile in the 14th century and a prominent politician. He was able to obtain a special authorization from the king to build this synagogue, which exceeded the height allowed at that time.
Samuel Halevi, by virtue of his privileged status, is the very symbol of the social success of certain Jews on the Iberian Peninsula during the Christian era. At the time, the synagogue bears his name. Today, it is one of the finest examples of mudahar craftsmanship in the whole of Spain. During construction, Samuel Halevi is particularly attentive to the decoration of the eastern wall of his synagogue, where the Torah is traditionally held in accordance with the Jewish religious tradition, which dictates that the Holy Ark must be oriented towards Jerusalem.
The Holy Ark is the most decorated surface in the synagogue, but also the area which is the most sacred, because it houses the scrolls of the Torah, where prayer is directed. It can be symbolically described as a window looking out towards Jerusalem. In the Jewish tradition, Jerusalem is the highest place on earth, the place closest to the sky, and the word Jerusalem itself is a plural in Hebrew. It has the ending ayim, as in Jerusalem. This has been interpreted as the existence of two Jerusalems, a heavenly Jerusalem and an earthly Jerusalem. Jerusalem is therefore a link between the heavenly world and the earthly one. This gives us the key to understanding that there are two levels of decor in the synagogue. One, which represents the earthly world, and the other, the celestial world, represented by the ceiling adorned with stars.
Samuel Halevi not only creates on the walls of his synagogue intertwined representations of the earth with its lush vegetation, but also shows his allegiance to the king with the royal crest. But the times are changing for Halevi. His king, Pedro of Castile, has him imprisoned, tortured, and finally killed. The wind begins to turn against the Sepharads. Final chapter.
Towards the end of the 14th century and the beginning of the 15th century, there was an important anti-Jewish movement on the Iberian Peninsula. It was led by the clergy who preached against the Jews. The Jewish neighborhood of Toledo was targeted and attacked during this period of hostility. Most of the synagogues were burnt to the ground, and furthermore, many Jews were put to death or forced to convert. The slogan of the time was, "Baptism or death."
In 1492, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, who reign over the whole of Spain, expel from their kingdom 200,000 Sephards, who depart south towards Africa, but also to lands across the Mediterranean basin. Some even wander to northern Europe.
The Sephardic Jewish tradition is deeply rooted in the story, still told, which says that when the Jews left Spain, they took with them the keys to their homes, always hoping to come back one day, open the door of their house, and to live here once again.
This once thriving place of Jewish life whose cultural effervescence deserves the title of the Golden Age of Sepharad, disappears from the Iberian Peninsula. Jews will never return with keys in hand to reclaim their property and possessions.